Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the Superintendent's Corner. Today we have a curriculum focus, and specifically we're here to talk to the community about some changes we are expecting in the area of history and social studies. And to help with the conversation, I have a distinguished panel with me today. Our Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, Sue Bertrand, 8th grade history and social studies teacher, Will Sullivan.
Hello.
Sarah Mulcahy is a senior at Longmeadow High School. Kelsey Lowe is also a senior at Longmeadow High. And Hannah Rosenmann is an 8th grade student at Williams Middle School. So thank you all for joining us and helping with the conversation today. So it was in early 2018 that the state released a new history and social studies framework. And since that time, our teachers and central office administrators and building administrators have sort of taken a deep dive into those standards to help us understand how we can implement these new expectations. And essentially a curriculum framework identifies what students are expected to know and be able to do at each grade level. And so it's been a while since we have experienced a new history and social studies framework. And I'm so appreciative of the efforts that Sue has led with our teachers and our administrators to, again, help us understand how to implement the history and social studies framework that is coming online beginning next year, I guess. And so I guess I'll turn to Sue and Will. Is this a framework that we ought to be excited about, that is going to offer new opportunities for our students and teachers?
I think it's an exciting framework. We are looking at our frameworks from pre-K right through 12. We have an opportunity to realign and make sure that we are teaching the right thing at the right time, hitting a lot of topics. And we are introducing civics to our curriculum starting next year with Will. So I don't know if you want to chat a little bit about your civics course next year?
Yeah, so next year in 8th grade we'll be learning about civics. And the emphasis of civics in the 8th grade is hopefully to get students thinking about how to be civically involved before they get to high school. So hopefully in high school they can have a bigger impact in their community. Right now, the way the frameworks are is that there's really not many civics courses until the higher levels of high school, 11th or 12th grade. So hopefully in 8th grade we can get students started with thinking about ideas and opinions and beliefs about what it means to be civically involved, and they can carry that with them into high school.
So it's great that the new framework has such an emphasis on civics, and I think especially in this day and age when we're seeing, at least at the national level, so much division and polarization, and so to develop civically minded young people who know how to participate in the political process is so important. So I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to think about the opportunities that will be available to our students as the new framework gets rolled out. And that civics emphasis is really, it's emphasized really K through 12. It's not just at the 8th grade level. Is that
That's right. There's an emphasis on content, on civics, and then tying that all in with the language standards. So we are providing students now with civic opportunities from preschool right through high school, right, with an 8th grade hard hit on civics, and then a project opportunity at least in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th.
So you mentioned a project opportunity, and I think that's an exciting phrase. I think that seems to me that the new framework really will require a lot of sort of research-based inquiry and learning for our students. So Will, can you talk a little bit more? We're seeing that the most significant change, I think, for us in the coming year anyways, is at that 8th grade level. And can you talk a little bit more about what that 8th grade experience will look like for students under the new framework?
So we'll start first with learning about the foundations of our government set by the ancient Greeks, ancient Romans, the Enlightenment era. We'll then talk about the actual formation of our government through the failures of the Articles of Confederation, how it led to the Constitution and the Constitutional Convention. We'll then take a deeper dive into the Constitution itself, examining the 3 branches and their role and their involvement in our government. We'll then take a look at the rights and responsibilities of the people in our country. That's where we'll really get into the action civics that Sue was kind of alluding to. The 5th sort of topic is that idea of breaking down amendments in court cases and kind of developing our own opinions and taking a look at precedent with court cases and how Supreme Court ruled on certain issues in our country. We'll then take a look at the Massachusetts state government as well as local governments and try and compare and contrast how they work with our national government. And then finally, we'll have a big emphasis on media literacy and free press.
So you mentioned a couple things that resonated with me. One was the idea of helping students develop reasoned, informed opinions, right, as opposed to opinions that are knee-jerk or reactionary. So that's really interesting. You also use the phrase, and Sue, feel free to jump in here, you use the phrase action civics. So what does that mean specifically?
Yeah, so Sue and I actually went to a conference over the summer that the state put on for the new civic standards, and they broke this down really well. They said there's really 3 levels of getting involved in your community. And the first level is you see that there is trash in your town, so you pick up the trash as you go by. The second level is organizing a committee to go out and pick up trash around the town. The third level, which is the action civics part, is, well, what's the reason why there's so much trash, and trying to get some systemic changes to prevent that problem, whether that's adding more trash cans to Bliss Park to prevent that issue from happening. So the goal is for every 8th grade student in the coming years to participate in some sort of action civics project like that, either at the local or the state level.
Excellent. It reminds me of the project that some of our elementary students took on last year with the recycling commission and trying to work towards the elimination of plastic bags, and that's a good illustration of action civics, I think. So, so that's exciting to hear and exciting to learn about. From our teachers' perspective, what are our teachers doing, Sue or Will, to prepare for the new frameworks?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, so we have committees at elementary, middle, and high school level, and the elementary folks are working hard. We have representatives from every grade level, from every school. The first thing that happens when we have new frameworks or new standards is we unpack them, really look at them pretty deeply to see what we're doing currently, where it matches up, where we need to shift things around. So we're in that process really in all 3 phases. Because we have civics starting in 8th grade, that means 8th grade will no longer be teaching U.S. history. And U.S. history is headed up to the high school, not for next year, but the year after. So the high school is grappling with where that fits in, how they'll fit that in their sequence. So it'll be probably U.S. history 1, 2, and a world sequence, and then electives. So that'll be new for the high school. And
that's so important for us to have a sort of a defined scope and sequence that where there's some alignment from grade to grade to grade. And I'm encouraged to hear about the conversations that are happening between 8th grade teachers and 9th grade teachers on the new social studies framework. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, I've been working with Leanne over at Glenbrook, Leanne LaJoy, quite a bit. We meet a few times a month to talk about the new standards, and we've worked really hard to develop a strong scope and sequence, as well as some common assessments and some activities that we can do that are really authentic and engaging for our students, like mock debates or a mock constitutional convention, some sort of court case, scenario role-playing sort of thing, to really get our students thinking about and involved in what being involved in the government would look like.
That's great. So to the extent that the new framework encourages us to encourage students to be more active participants in their learning, this is a great thing. Yeah, that's exciting. So we have, you talked about action civics, and so we thought today it would make sense to introduce some civics in action to the community. And so as examples of that, as great examples of that, we have some students from Longmeadow High who recently had the opportunity to participate in a national leadership forum. And this was a forum focused on drug prevention, and Longmeadow has a community drug-free community coalition. And so this was a national conference where you guys had an opportunity to hear from national experts and to visit Capitol Hill and visit with some of our policymakers. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience at the National Leadership Forum and what that meant to you?
Yeah, so for the government portion, it was really cool. We got to go to the different Senate offices and other representative offices, and we got to meet with Richard Neal's staff, and same with Ed Markey. Ed Markey came and spoke to us, and it was really cool to see how it worked on a bigger level.
Yeah, it was really interesting to us. We talked about it, but that there's so many different aides that work for each representative or senator. For Ed Markey, we met with his public health specialist, and the fact that he had a specialist for each different type of subject was really interesting, because you really don't think that there's all of these different people working under each of these important people, but yeah.
Gives you some idea of the scale and the scope of government, right?
Exactly.
When you're in the halls of power at Capitol Hill. That's a great opportunity for you guys. I mean, it's not every day that students have those chances to really meet face to face with policymakers and legislators. So what message did you bring to them, or what message did they have for you? So I know you met with Senator Markey and Representative Neal's staff and Senator Warren's staff as well. So what message did they have for you, and what message did you have for them?
We all brought pieces prepared to talk about the misuse of vaping that's on the rise in communities, and we found that a lot of people that went with us had the same issues. Like, we went with a group from Wilbraham, and they all had similar concerns. So we each brought different pieces. We talked about binge drinking with them, and then they would respond like how they could help us and what we needed them to do in order to help fix these problems in our communities.
It's great when you have that chance to bring local concerns to a national level. Anything else? Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, their big thing was saying, what are your concerns for your community? They wanted to hear a more personal side to the facts that they're seeing on their table. So I think they were really appreciative of everything that we told them that we're seeing in our community. And they really just wanted to know, what can we do for you guys? What can we provide to fix these concerns you guys have?
So we have obviously wonderfully talented social studies and history teachers in the district, but part of what we're here to illustrate today is how so much learning can happen outside the walls of Longmeadow High, and you can, when you're engaged in your community, you can learn civics firsthand. So can you talk a little bit about that, what, the learning experiences that you had on the trip?
Well, there's people from all over. There's people outside of the United States that came too. It was just seeing all those different people that had the same concerns and were working towards the same goal of prevention in their communities was really cool, because we think of it as on a local level, but going to that conference brought it to even more than a national level. So that gave us a lot of good learning experiences and talking about these issues with other people our age.
Yeah, just chatting with people that have the same passion as you was really interesting. I think we got a lot of good ideas out of just the conversations we'd have, even between sessions. So I think we have a lot going forward that should be exciting.
Yeah, it's neat to see how you guys see that connection between grassroots activism and then what's happening at the national level, at the federal level. So that's exciting. So what you heard from national experts, you had an opportunity to share strategies with other students from across the country. Have you come back with any strategies or activities that you hope to implement here in Longmeadow relating to drug prevention and drug awareness?
Yeah, there was a big focus on vaping at the conference, because that's one of the biggest issues that's happening this year and in recent years. So we're going to do a project with 6th grade classes, health classes, to try and prevent the misuse of e-cigarettes and vaping earlier, because we go to 8th grade classes now. And we do this as a club called SAD, Students Against Destructive Decisions. So we take members from there and peer leadership. That's a class at the high school. So we're going to start going to 6th grade classes now.
Excellent. What prompted you to take the message to the lower grades from, instead of 8th grade, focusing on 6th grade?
The conference really focused on the power of prevention. So starting that education earlier is really important in preventing kids from being involved with e-cigarettes and vaping. So
I appreciate that you're working closely too with our health teachers and Mrs. Warren, who's our substance abuse response coordinator, and you guys are in regular contact with her in terms of the messaging and the lessons that you're going to bring to the 6th graders. So really appreciate everything you guys are bringing back from your experiences in DC. And then Hannah, similarly, Hannah is an 8th grade student at Williams Middle School, and Hannah was chosen by her history teacher and her school administrators to represent Longmeadow as our Project 351 ambassador. And this is sort of a distinguished honor that you have as representing Longmeadow. It's a statewide coalition of students who are civically minded and who come up with some sort of state level community action steps. So you want to talk a little bit about your involvement in Project 351, what it is and what it's meant to you?
So Project 351 is basically a nonprofit that's based in Boston, and so they choose one sort of ambassador who's in 8th grade from every town or city, and so there's 351. And so basically once you're chosen, you'll carry out 2 service projects in the year, like inside your town.
So I know that Project 351, it's been around for probably about 7 or 8 years now at least, and it's an organization that has worked with the Massachusetts Military Heroes Fund and a lot of other great statewide organizations. So we appreciate your involvement in it. And again, I know Mr. Sullivan's a great history and social studies teacher, but what have you learned through your involvement in Project 351 that maybe you couldn't have learned in a regular social studies classroom?
So, like, I'd say the main thing that I learned is that getting involved in civics or making good decisions doesn't always have to be like this big thing. Like, pretty much anyone can get involved. And also, whatever you do, it doesn't have to be this huge occasion. It could just be donating somewhere. And also, another thing I learned is that a lot of people who are in the government officials, they get involved in things like Project 351. So on our opening day in January, I met Charlie Baker and Lauren Baker, as well as Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley.
Excellent. And tell us a little bit about some of the projects you'll be involved with here locally, some of the civic projects.
So this spring, we have a thing called Spring Service, and so this year we're collecting clothing items for this organization called Cradles to Crayons, which is in Boston. And so at the end of this month, actually, I'll be doing a drive at school.
That's excellent. So, I mean, if you think about the range of activities we've heard sort of represented here today, and so, you know, Mr. Sullivan talked about sort of developing in-class projects where students are engaged in research and developing informed opinions, and then we heard from our seniors talking about sort of more sort of political activism and working on the policy front, and then Hannah kind of focusing on developing projects that inspire compassion and encourage us to be united in the ways we support some of the neediest citizens in the area. So it's encouraging that this new social studies framework has kind of pointed us in so many important directions. And again, you know, in this day and age when we have seen so much division and polarization, it's great that we have opportunities for our students to come together with other students across the country, and Hannah to work with 350 other 8th grade students across the state of Massachusetts. Those are really exciting opportunities for us. So next steps with the history and social studies framework, we'll continue to unpack the framework. We'll look towards a civics class next year in 8th grade. Any other steps beyond that we ought to be thinking about?
We're in the final stages of the book piloting process. Hopefully we'll have our top choice delivered to you guys soon.
Excellent. And I know we've been talking to the school committee about that, and we hope to be able to have an adoption that will set the teachers and students up for success next year. And the other thing is in the other core subject areas, math and ELA and science, there's a end of year state assessment. That doesn't yet exist in the area of social studies and history, and is that on the horizon? Do we want that to be on the horizon? What might that look like? Any ideas?
It seems like it's on the horizon. In a few years it'll be an 8th grade social studies state test set at the same time. It'll be like the same time that the science ones are, so I think it's 5th, 8th, and 10th.
That's great, yeah.
I think there's a committee being formed in order to explore that, and not sure what that assessment will look like, depending on probably who's in government at the time, right? But hopefully they're moving away towards an MCAS type test and some other kind of assessment performance. So
that's where the action civic.
That's what we're hearing. Something more actual,
Again, that action civic. I mean, that seems to be the theme that runs through that whole pre-K to 12 framework. So that's exciting and encouraging. So I appreciate you all coming together. We've got a lot of work in front of us in terms of implementing that new history and social studies framework. But with the work that our students are involved in, they are great ambassadors for the town of Longmeadow. We appreciate your involvement civically. We appreciate you representing your families and your schools and your community so well. So thank you, and that's it for today's edition of the Superintendent's Corner.